Off the back of that cup final that we saw yesterday, never again will Erik ten Hag make the mistake of starting Jadon Sancho over Alejandro Garnacho. At the time, I think it was the correct decision, but hindsight has taught us that it was definitely incorrect. Alejandro Garnacho exudes Manchester United. He is Manchester United. When you think about the fibres and what Manchester United represent, that is Garnacho. Cast your minds back to Manchester United's final game before the Qatar World Cup started. Manchester United are in a difficult position. They're playing away at Fulham. Suddenly, bang. Alejandro Garnacho, a teenager, scores with basically the final kick of the game. That is so Manchester United. A teenager securing the points for Manchester United with the last kick of the game. That is the definition. If you distill Manchester United, that's what it represents. Jadon Sancho just is not that. I understand why Ten Hag started Sancho, by the way. I think overall, at the time, it would be seen as being the correct decision. Starting Garnacho would have seemed slightly maybe irresponsible. Throwing a young lad into a game at Wembley, it's a cauldron of fire against Manchester City, a sublime team, a derby, a baptism of fire for the young man. But what we learned from Garnacho's brief cameo is that he is so up to the challenge. And what we also learned from starting Jadon Sancho is that his Manchester United career is well and truly over. It's over. It sounds harsh, but it's over. There needs to be a total clear out and a ruthless clear out from Erik ten Hag. There are far too many players at that club that are not good enough. The chasm between Man City and Manchester United is huge. And the only way that they are really going to be able to equalise it is if they offload the players that are simply not good enough. And think of the money that was paid for Sancho. Think about the fanfare that arrived with him. Think about what was expected of him. Think about the wages that he's on. Think about everything that Jadon Sancho is meant to be. And he is a shadow of that man, because people won't like this, but I think Jadon Sancho is a cowardly footballer. That is what he represents to me. He isn't the kind of player that is prepared to take the game by the scruff of the neck. He isn't the kind of player that is prepared to drag his team to victories. He isn't the kind of player that is prepared to put his body on the line. He is a delicate, fragile footballer. And he's a lovely little player. But you cannot get to the very top by being delicate and being fragile. You have to be brilliant, you have to be ruthless, you have to be determined, and you have to desperately want it. And I don't think Jadon Sancho exudes any of those qualities. And I would go so far as saying, I think Jadon Sancho could be one of the worst signings Manchester United have made post-Ferguson. Not only because of the player he is, but because of what was expected, what he was supposed to be. When they signed Jadon Sancho, it felt like it was a coup. It felt like they got one over on everybody else. One over on Chelsea, where there had been a link. One over on Manchester City, where there had obviously been a link. And it just has not worked out that way. I mean, there's zero output from him, zero threat in that game. I mean, he's so rarely responsible for a decisive impact on any game that he features. I honestly believe that 90% of the games that Jadon Sancho features in would end in the exact same scoreline, whether he was there or not. He doesn't change anything. And that is the sort of player that he is supposed to be. But it's because on the biggest stage, he shrinks. Big games give big players an opportunity. Big players, they thrive when the pressure is on. Playing Manchester City at Wembley to stop them potentially winning a treble, that is the kind of platform that the greats of Manchester United in previous eras would have loved. David Beckham would have loved to have been out there yesterday. Dennis Irwin would have loved to have been out there yesterday. Paul Ince would have loved to have been out there yesterday. Eric Cantona would have done anything to be out there yesterday. And that is Manchester United. Can you imagine Brian Robson if he had the opportunity to play in that game at 30 years old? Imagine how he would have approached the game. And compare that to how Jadon Sancho approached the game. Didn't seem fussed. There was a moment, and I don't like looking too deeply into these little moments that you see on social media, but he seemed to completely ignore Sir Alex Ferguson when he walked out onto the pitch. Again, I'm not reading too much into that, but if you watch the clip, you'll see Ferguson gives everybody a pat on the back. Lots of players respond to Sir Alex Ferguson's presence as well. You would. You're in the presence, in the shadow of an icon. Appreciate that. Sancho traipses past. I just really don't get it. And then when you juxtapose how bad Sancho was with Garnacho, the decision is made. Jadon Sancho needs to leave. How they find somebody to take on his wages, how they recoup anywhere near the amount of money that they spent on him, I do not know. But Garnacho needs to be starting games. There was a moment, 91st minute. I know everybody who watched the game felt this. If I say the 91st minute, I am sure that you will know exactly what I'm talking about. You could identify a quality in Garnacho that is so suited and perfect, not only for Manchester United, but especially for Manchester United. The ball, right, rolls out of play and Garnacho's over there. Garnacho is screaming desperately at the ball boy to give the ball back, to get the ball moving, because Manchester City's players are trying to run down the clock, and there was an urgency and a desperation and a desire on display from Garnacho in that one little incident, that one tiny instance. It's a microcosm of who he is. Desperate. Get the ball back. Don't celebrate. Don't celebrate if you equalise. Celebrate when you win. That kind of mentality. And the way that he's over there arguing with the ball boy, desperately trying to get the game back. That's what the Manchester United fans, who were loud, I thought, that is what they want to see. That is the kind of player that they empathise with. And you can just feel that Garnacho is a legend in the making. You can just feel that he is a superstar in waiting. I can see the Stretford end now, giving it out Argentina. I can see it. It's going to happen. The way they did for Heinze and Tevez and whatever else. You can see that there is an icon being born. And standing in his way is Jadon Sancho. It's an inconvenience for Erik ten Hag. It's an inconvenience. Like when you think Martial out, Antony out, both injured, Ten Hag has a decision to make. Does he go for a young, raw, unpredictable, inexperienced talent? Or does he go for a more experienced Jadon Sancho? Ten Hag made the wrong call. I understand why he made it. And hindsight has told me that he made it, by the way. I'm not suggesting that he got it wrong at the time. But hindsight, history has taught us that it was a wrong call. If you asked me at the time, I would have obviously said Sancho. And I think most of you would have done. I'm sure that there will be a few professors in the comment telling us that they obviously said Garnacho. But I think a lot of people would have said that the correct player to play in that instance is Jadon Sancho. But it's just not the case anymore. It really just simply is not the case. You know, I just thought that Jadon Sancho hid. I felt like he hid when his team were in possession, and I don't think he did anything when his team were out of possession. When Manchester United were in the ascendancy, which didn't happen often, he was nowhere to be seen. When Manchester United were in the ascendancy, he was nowhere to be seen. When Manchester City had the ball, he down tools. Where was he? Where was he? You know, he seemed to be totally devoid of any belief, of any fight, and just nothing. Now, his only contribution, off the top of my head that I can think of, he protected the penalty spot from being scuffed up by City's players, didn't he? Before Bruno Fernandes scored, Jadon Sancho made it his business to make sure nobody got near the penalty spot. 73 million quid well spent. He's a bodyguard of a penalty spot. You know, and if you compare it all to Garnacho's determination and confidence, the way that he was running at City's defence, you know, he was only on the pitch for half hour. And yet, that 30 minutes or so that he was on the pitch, it cannot contrast with the appearance from Jadon Sancho any more strongly. Like, it was just so stark. Jadon Sancho's apathy compared to Garnacho's determination. That's what it is. Garnacho was determined. He wanted it. He was hungry. He was so desperate. I swear, it didn't look like Jadon Sancho cared. It didn't look like he was affected by the result. It just didn't seem to matter. And on the evidence of that game, if you watch that 90 minutes, you look at Garnacho's contribution, you compare it to Sancho. Sancho didn't care. Garnacho behaved the way a fan would. If you're a season ticket holder in the Stretford end or a Man United fan from anywhere, if you had a chance to get on the pitch, it mattered. It just didn't seem to matter. And Sancho's had so many chances. You know, Ten Hag has given him every chance to kick on. And he's even gone out of his way. He's even done things that other managers wouldn't do. You know, he allowed Sancho a few months away from the club to improve his physical and mental condition. For what? He's got nothing back in return. He has allowed Sancho to effectively have some time off of a season, a long, arduous season, where Manchester United have competed on 4 fronts. He has allowed him time off. For what? Not every manager would do that, by the way. I think Eric Ten Hag is seen as being quite a stern, severe manager, but that shows a very considerate, very kind side. He's been very empathetic to Sancho, but you just can't do that. Jadon Sancho is 23 years old. People constantly talk about him in terms of potential, and they talk about him as if he were a promising teenager. But those days have gone. I'm so bored of hearing about the player that he might be, or the player that he could become, or the potential in Jadon Sancho. He's not about that. He costs 73 million quid. He's one of the highest paid players in the league. He should be winning games like that game yesterday for Manchester United. He should be the player that is taking the game by the scruff of the neck and dragging United to victory. That's what he should be doing. But he's just nowhere near it. And in my opinion, I think he's on borrowed time. I think if a team come in with even a fairly palatable offer for Manchester United's winger, they're going to have to take it. Even if they end up taking a bit of a heavy hit on the rate, get him off the wage, get him off the accounts, and start again. Bring someone else in, because it just hasn't worked. It really hasn't. And I think that Ten Hag would be tempted to take the money and run. This summer is a massive one for Manchester United, because the golfing class between them and Man City was on display yesterday. And it wasn't only him, by the way. Christian Eriksen. I was watching the game on the club, wasn't I? And I made a bet. I said, tell me when Christian Eriksen does something good here. Adam McCullough will always defend Christian Eriksen. He's a big fan of Christian Eriksen. I think he started the season quite well. He allowed Manchester United to kind of up the pace when they wanted the tempo to be increased, to take the sting out of the game when they wanted to do that. But since he came back from injury, I don't think he's been particularly good at all. And yeah, he's very composed in the middle, but he really has struggled. And how Manchester United fans aren't desperate for Mason Mount when you think about the elevation from Christian Eriksen to Mason Mount. It would totally reshape that Manchester United midfield. With Mason Mount on the pitch yesterday and Garnacho on the pitch, it would have been a totally different game. Imagine adding Harry Kane to it instead of Wouty Boy as well. Big summer for Manchester United. They are really going to have to get it right and be ruthless. And I think that this ruthless streak has to start with Jadon Sancho being offered around, touted about. Thank you so much for watching this video. Desperately keen to hear your thoughts on this. Have I been too harsh on Jadon Sancho? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please give this video a like and click subscribe if you're new around here. Cheers.